Welcome to the Isle of Knowledge. Today we will talk about the Opium Wars, two armed conflicts in China, between the forces of the Western countries, and the Qing dynasty, in the middle of the 19th century. Please feel free to like and subscribe, to join us in our quest for thriving with knowledge, and the right information. Hope you will enjoy the video. Since ancient times, opium has been known for its medicinal properties as a painkiller. It has also been used as an edible oil, and of course, as a psychoactive drug. Opium is a highly addictive non-synthetic narcotic derived from the poppy plant. The opium poppy is the primary source of many narcotics, including morphine, codeine, and even heroin. Papaver somniferum, commonly known as the poppy plant, is the source of opium. It was cultivated in the Mediterranean region, as early as 5000 BC, and has since grown in numerous countries worldwide. The milky liquid that extracts, from the unripe seed pod of the poppy, is scraped off by hand, and dried in the air to produce what is known as opium. Did you ever heard opium oil is used for cooking? Let me know in the comment section. For more than 1,000 years, China was the eastern terminus of the Silk Road, and the source of fabulous luxury goods, such as silk, porcelain, paper, bronze products, fabrics, semi-precious stones, dyes, ivory, tea, and spices. European joint stock trading companies, such as the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company, VOC, were eager to enter this ancient barter system. In the 1700s, European nations, mainly Britain, the Netherlands, and France, sought to expand their Asian trade networks, by connecting with the powerful Qing Empire in China. However, the European traders had a problem: Chinese control of the commercial port of Canton. Chinese did not allow any European to leave the port city, and enter China. Worst of all, although European consumers were crazy for Chinese silks, porcelain, and tea, the Chinese wanted nothing from Europe in exchange, but hard cash, in this case, silver. Britain soon faced a serious trade deficit with China. It had no domestic silver reserves, and had to buy all its silver from Mexico, or from European powers with colonial silver mines. Above all, Britain's thirst for tea made the trade imbalance increasingly desperate. In the early 19th century, however, the British East India Company invented a second form of payment that was illegal, but accepted by Chinese traders: opium from British India. The opium, produced mainly in Bengal, was stronger than the traditional opium in Chinese medicine. In addition, Chinese consumers began smoking opium instead of eating the resin, which had a stronger effect. Rapidly, consumption and addiction to the new opium increased in China. According to some estimates, by the 1830s, as many as 90% of young males, along China's east coast were addicted to smoking opium. Thanks to illegal opium smuggling, the balance of trade tipped in Britain's favor. In 1839, China's Daoguang Emperor decided to take action against British drug smuggling. The Chinese besieged 13 British smugglers inside their warehouses. The Chinese confiscated opium and opium products worth some £2 million. Chinese officials ordered the destruction of those products. Outraged, British traders immediately demand the British Home Government intervene. July 1839, saw the next incident that escalated tension between the Qing and the British. On July 7, 1839, drunk British and American sailors from several opium clipper ships rampaged the village in Kowloon, killing a Chinese man and vandalizing a Buddhist temple. Following this Kowloon incident, Qing officials demanded that the foreigners turn over the guilty men for trial. But Britain refused, citing China's different legal system as the basis for refusal. Even though the crimes took place on Chinese soil, and the victims were Chinese, Britain claimed that the sailors were entitled to extraterritorial rights. Six sailors were subsequently tried in a British court in Canton. Although convicted, they were released upon their return to Britain and treated as heroes. After the Kowloon incident, Qing officials declared that neither British nor other foreign merchants would be allowed to trade with China unless they complied with Chinese laws. China also declared the opium trade illegal, and anyone violating would be subject to Chinese jurisdiction. The British Superintendent of Commerce in China, Charles Elliot, immediately responded by suspending all British trade with China, and ordered the Royal Navy to blockade the mouth of the Pearl River to prevent further British ships from entering. On November 3, 1839, the British merchant ship, Royal Saxon, approached, but the Royal Navy fleet began to fire on it. The Qing Navy tried to protect the Royal Saxon, which led to the First Battle of Quang Pi. The British Navy sank a number of Chinese ships. It was the beginning of a long string of disastrous defeats for Qing forces. Over the next 2.5 years, Qing forces lost battles to the British, both at sea and on land. The British seized Canton, Chusan, and the Bogue forts at the mouth of the Pearl River, Ningbo, and Dingai. In mid-1842, the British seized Shanghai, effectively controlling the mouth of the critical Yangtze River as well. Stunned and humiliated, the Qing government had no option but to sue for peace. In August 1842, representatives of Queen Victoria Britain and the Daoguang Emperor of China agreed to a peace treaty, called the Treaty of Nanking. This agreement is widely called the First Unequal Treaty, as Britain removed a number of major concessions from the Chinese, while offering nothing in return except for an end to hostilities. The Treaty of Nanking opened 5 ports to British traders. Britain was accorded the most favored nation in trade status, while its citizens were granted extraterritorial rights. British became superior and above Chinese law. The new treaty empowered British consuls to negotiate directly with local officials, and as a result, all British prisoners of war were released. Chinese ceded the island of Hong Kong to Britain in perpetuity. Ultimately, the Qing government even agreed to pay war reparations, totaling 21 million silver dollars, over the following 3 years. China's agony for trying to protect its citizens from being drugged was not limited to those reparations. The new treaty forced them to undergo painful economic hardships and a loss of sovereignty. What was the most damaging was its loss of prestige. The First Opium War exposed China as a paper tiger. The neighbors, particularly the Japanese, who were watching it, took note of Chinese weakness. Subsequent to the First Opium War, Qing Chinese officials were quite reluctant to enforce the terms of the British treaties, as well as the similarly unequal treaties imposed by France and the United States. Making matters worse, in 1854, Britain demanded additional concessions from the Chinese, that include the opening of all of China's ports to foreign traders, a zero-tariff rate on British imports, and the legalization of Britain's trade in opium, from Burma and India into China. Although China held off on these changes for some time, those demands came to the limelight on October 8, 1856, with the Arrow incident. The Arrow was a smuggling ship registered in China, but based out of Hong Kong, which was a British Crown colony. When Chinese officials arrested its crew of 12, on suspicion of smuggling and piracy, the British protested that the Hong Kong-based ship was outside of China's jurisdiction. Britain demanded the Chinese release the crew, under the extraterritoriality clause of the Treaty of Nanjing. Although the Chinese authorities were well within their rights to board the Arrow, and in fact, the ship's Hong Kong registration had expired at that time, Britain forced them to release the sailors. Even though China released those sailors as requested, the British destroyed 4 Chinese coastal forts, and sank more than 20 naval junks between October 23 and November 13, 1856. The Chinese military was weakened by their battle with the Taiping Rebellion at the time, so they did not have much military capability to spare to defend their sovereignty from this new British assault. Meanwhile, in February of 1856, a French Catholic missionary named Auguste Chapdelaine was arrested in Guangxi, mountainous terrain in the far south of China. He was charged with preaching Christianity outside of the treaty ports, in violation of the Sino-French agreements, and also collaborating with the Taiping rebels, who brought lots of misery to the Chinese at that time. Father Chapdelaine was sentenced to beheading, but his jailers beat him to death. Though the trial was carried out according to Chinese law, and was in compliance with the treaty, the French government used this incident as an excuse to join the British in the Second Opium War. Between December of 1857 and mid-1858, the Anglo-French forces captured several forts including Guangzhou, Guangdong, and the Taku near Tianjin. China surrendered unconditionally, and was forced to sign the punitive Treaty of Tianjin in June of 1858. Defeated and humiliated, the Chinese were demanded to sign another treaty. The new treaty demanded several things. First, China should allow the UK, France, Russia, and the US to establish official embassies in Peking, current Beijing. Second, China opened 11 additional ports to foreign traders and established free navigation for foreign vessels up the Yangtze River. Third, to allow foreigners to travel into interior China, and lastly to pay war indemnities at the tune of 8 million taels of silver to France and Britain. 1 tael is equal to roughly 37 grams. Through a separate treaty, Russia took the left bank of the Amur River from China. In 1860, the Russians established their major Pacific Ocean port city of Vladivostok on this newly acquired land. The Second Opium War was yet another painful experience for the Chinese. Ever harsher treaty demands forced the Shanfeng Emperor to resist the Western powers by refusing the ratification of the new treaty. When the French and British attempted to land military forces, numbering in the thousands at Tianjin, and march on Beijing, the Chinese initially blocked them. However, the Anglo-French forces subsequently made it to the land, and on September 21, 1860, destroyed a Qing army of 10,000. On October 6, 1860, Anglo-French forces entered Beijing, where they looted and burned the emperor's summer palaces. The entire value of the items they robbed is little known to the world. The Second Opium War ended on October 18, 1860, with the Chinese ratification of a revised version of the Treaty of Tianjin. In addition to the provisions we discussed above, The revised treaty mandated equal treatment for Chinese who converted to Christianity, the legalization of opium trading, and Britain also received parts of coastal Kowloon, on the mainland across from Hong Kong Island. The Treaty of Tianjin's provisions subsequently sparked the Boxer Rebellion of 1900, a popular uprising against foreign invasion and occupation. The Second Opium War also marked the beginning of a slow descent of the Qing dynasty, that ended with the abdication of Emperor Puyi in 1911. The opium business provided enormous wealth for the British East India Company. To meet the growing demand, the British encouraged Indian farmers to grow more opium, which created additional socio-economic problems in India. Following the Second Opium War, opium became a major global commodity that was produced and traded on a similar scale to other commodities like coffee and tea. The legalization of opium allowed the continuous flow of Bengal opium to mainland China. As a result, opium consumption in China skyrocketed, thereby increasing the number of opium smokers from 3 million in the 1830s to 15 million by the 1890s. According to the Chinese delegation to the International Opium Commission of Shanghai, the number of opium consumers in China had increased to 21.5 million by 1906. However, some analysts believe that the number should be somewhere around 40 million in the 1890s, or the equivalent of 10% of the population, and to grow further. The Chinese opium epidemic became the largest substance abuse problem the world ever faced. It is estimated that at the beginning of the 20th century, China was consuming between 85% to 95% of the global opium production. The social, cultural, and economic price China paid for the opium epidemic is enormous. It took China several decades to overcome the nation's opium crisis. Although greatly contained, even today, China's opium problem is not totally resolved. The current international drug control system largely stemmed from the measures taken to control the Chinese opium epidemic. Present-day Chinese historians see the Opium Wars as a war of aggression that taught the Chinese the hard lesson that if you are backward, you will take a beating. Lessons Chinese learned through the Opium Wars ultimately shaped the rationale for the Chinese Revolution against imperialism and feudalism, which emerged and then succeeded decades later. As in the Opium Wars, and in every historical event, there are many lessons to learn, which are applicable for today and for tomorrow. With saying that, we are wrapping up the video. We wish you a wonderful day. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing, which means a lot to me. I love to see your thoughts in the comment section.